Thanks, everyone. They've put the really exciting topic last, right? The physical world, the physical branches of our banking environment. First of all, I want to say that a lot of the questions that have been posed today, I've really enjoyed, because they're good questions, and we should be asking those questions. And so I've got a couple of questions, and we'll go through those questions today. But I wanted to just thank everyone for being here today, just generally speaking, because you didn't have to come. You could have stayed at your office, you could have checked this out on video tomorrow, or at your convenience, but no, you've come here, you're in person, you've been chatting, you've been meeting people today, and I think that says something about the need for physical spaces and being together and connecting and being social. So, for audience participation, can I get everyone to put their phones down? A very simple exercise. Stand up and shake the person's hand next to you. Hopefully you've... Okay, and so you can sit back down again. Okay, so I won't be long. I'll just take 20 minutes, and then we can go have some drinks. So how about that, right? Just a handshake. It's very personal. It can be used to create relationships, etc., etc. And I know that a lot of the people in this room, your business is based on that. Your business is based on the fact that you're able to create really strong relationships with people with your branches. And that's a differentiator. So at NCR, we sit between the physical and the digital. So whether it's software, whether it's services, whether it's technology, it's our primary goal to get the most out of physical spaces and to connect customer journeys from the physical to the digital and the digital to the physical and whatnot, and create beautiful customer experiences in that way. So this presentation's got two parts. First part is all about form and function of a physical branch, and how is that changing, or how does that need to change, perhaps? And so that's it's forward-looking. It's you might have seen some of these examples before, but let's go through them and let's consider them. The second part of the presentation is all about optimizing the experience within a branch, and there's a couple of things I want to share here in terms of lessons learned. So let's get into it. But first question, why are we closing branches? You read in the news, some of you are involved in these decisions, and yes, there is less foot traffic. And yes, the cost, the cost or the return on the investment isn't what it used to be. But I mean, is that a reason that we should be closing branches? Is that a reason that we should not have branches anymore? Well, I don't think so. I think that the bank branch and the role and the format and the purpose hasn't kept up with the times. Customer expectations have changed. Financial expectations have changed. And so in a market with high uncertainty, with low growth, there's a lot of money that's being spent on these physical branches. So how can we take an opportunity to, let's rethink things. Let's think about what we're doing with our use of physical spaces and how we're maximizing them. So FinTech and disruption, we've heard a lot about this today, but I mean, in the last 5 years, we've seen 50 neobanks. Let's call them neobanks. There's now 50 of them, and they weren't there more than 5 years ago, and they've shown that you don't need a branch to get customers. So again, why do we have branches? I mean, traditionally, more branches meant more deposits. But I'm here to argue the case that not only do we need branches, the importance of branches is actually going to increase in a digital world. This is the argument for today. In some cases, banks are opening branches. Maybe it's opportunistic, and in fact, in this case, Metro Bank's competing on this basis. They're extending their hours of operation. Dogs are coming in. There's a whole range of things that they're doing to kind of meet customers at where they are today. So there is a supply and demand thing happening here, right? We're not ready to. There's more demand for branches in some markets, and so. We're also seeing that in some cases, digital-first banks have actually found that it's more optimal to grow with a physical presence. And so this bank here in Italy, Banca, has grown at 4,000 customers a month or something. You can look at the case study online. But they've attributed 63% of that growth to a physical channel or their physical branch. And yes, they do look pretty cool. But for this bank, this is what works. And so this is that's only in this year, by the way. So we're opening branches, we're closing them. Who's right, who's wrong? Well, I think everyone's right in this example. But if we take a more macro lens and look at what's happening with the market, and we look at open banking, we look at how there are more players now, there are more products, there are more services. Well, just maybe that's making the market more fragmented. And in a more fragmented market, in financial services, maybe that's going to create some uncertainty. Maybe that's going to put a bit of pressure on trust. And maybe in that environment, there's an opportunity to use our handshake and our physical spaces to differentiate. And so the argument here is that actually that can be used to cut through a bit of the noise and create and build trust in an environment where there's a lot of things changing. So let's have a look at some examples, right? But what we're seeing in terms of a trend is that personal connections require purpose-built branches. So we're saying, traditionally we saw the one-size-fits-all branch approach. You take one branch and you just roll it out. And then we went to the hub and spoke model. Now we're seeing a trend towards purpose-built branches. So actually optimizing a physical space with a location, with the demographics of the people nearby, with the products and services that we've got there, and integrating that experience into our lives. In the same way that I think FinTech is narrowing in on specific customers and solving specific pain points. And so let's have a quick look at this idea of a purpose-built branch. But how are we meeting the changing needs of each of these profiles? I've got 4 here. We heard earlier today that DBS has 17, and different players have different different ways of categorizing their customers. But how are we creating specific physical experiences in the same way that we are creating hyper-personalized digital products? Let's apply the same level of thinking to the physical. So the first trend we're seeing is microformats. There are a lot of low-cost, full-service branches being deployed, which means more locations at an easier price point, right? And this has been around for a while, right? People have been experimenting with it, etc. But what we're seeing is that the mega banks or the larger players, at least in other parts of the world, are getting into this space because they've overlooked, in my opinion, how the economics and the advantages that they can get out of operating these smaller micro formats. So these smaller formats enable easier integration into our lifestyle. So let's take 3 examples. So Ocean First Bank, I know it's a US example, but stay with me. So we've got a retirement village. So this here is very small format example, full function. So it's got the self-service ATM capabilities and whatnot. It does have video teller. Kind of you can do your video banking as well, but there's no safe, there's no TCR. It's a low-cost operation. There's just the ATMs and a meeting space. So you can see here that the hours of operation are actually 7 to 7, but there are staffed hours, I think a couple of hours a day. So there's only someone manning the branch or available for a smaller period of time, which means they can visit many branches and service this strategy. In some cases, you can book an appointment, online, on your app. A medical center, a great example as well, right? You got customers that you really want, highly desirable customers, whether they're doctors or medical staff. How can you make banking, get their physical presence more integrated into their life? And how can we start using these micro banks, micro formats to make banking more accessible? We've got the apartment complex as another example here, and so it's very small function, very small footprint and function. So we're seeing a rise in this, and if we're not already seeing it in Australia, I'm predicting that we'll see a bit more of this. So the second kind of trend here in terms of branches is co-location. So retail's done a really good job of integrating into our new lifestyle, or our changing lifestyles. And so whether it's coffee shops or co-working or airports, how are we integrating banking into those lifestyles? So here we've got the example of Millennial Bank in a mall. We put branches in malls today. I mean, it's nothing new, but in an open format where people can just come and sit between meetings, between there might be university students, etc. They can sit. They've got coffee. They've got free Wi-Fi, and there's an opportunity to just be. And then, should there be questions, there's an opportunity to get your banking done there as well. Right. So traditionally, we see this environment where you go to a branch for a transaction. You go in there to kind of get something done. You're in, you're out as fast as possible. They're selling. The bank is selling you something, and you have to have it, and you're shopping around. And this is more of an experience. It's an opportunity to actually get to know people and understand where they're coming from. And in theory, if we had all of the ability to kind of tailor products to meet those needs, it's a great environment to do so. Universities. Maybe more of a US example, but we should think about it, right? Because particularly when you've got university students using a ton of different apps now, there's a lot more variety in what they're doing, et cetera, et cetera. They might not necessarily have the financial literacy to understand exactly what they're doing with all these apps and come up with the right financial strategies, et cetera. What better place to build trust than and brand in an environment where you're integrated into their lifestyle? They don't leave the campus. Some would say they don't have too much money, but you're there being present and offering an experience. So that's what we're seeing there as another example. Alliances with third parties. So tell me it doesn't work. Well, a Capital One's been doing it for 10 years with coffee shops. And so they've got 40 of these coffee shops in America, where effectively the primary purpose is coffee, meetings, hanging out, etc. The secondary purpose is banking, and so that's working quite well for them. They're attracting a lot of young customers in the gig economy through that avenue. So open environments. This here is an example of putting a branch in an airport where it becomes part of the furniture. It's not one of many in a shopping mall. And so here, if you look at, if we go back to those questions that I think it was Darren that was asking those 3 questions. We need to apply that same level of thinking here. I'm not saying we open up branches in airports. Is there a customer? Is there a pain point? And we go through that process. But in this example here, there's a lot of pain points in the airport. Not everyone has a nice place to sit in an airport. The coffee's not always that good. The Wi-Fi is not always that good. And so why not invite people into that space and become part of their journey, become part of their holiday experience, etc. You could even pre-order some different currency on your mobile phone and collect it up here before boarding your flight. So they're just ideas, right? And the Virgin Lounges, it's obviously a staged picture here, but if you do some research online, there's some great examples of what they're doing here in terms of creating lounges where people can meet. They can relax, unwind, and hang out, and of course get their banking done as well. So the kitchen, this is a very interesting example where it's a brand new multi-million-dollar branch, flagship branch by Halifax in London. I went there a couple of weeks ago, and the ground floor average looked very similar to other branches. But when you go upstairs, I found that 2 of these tables were completely full on a Sunday afternoon. And what people were there for a workshop, and the banking staff were helping them with different things, and they were just running a free workshop. And people were there, they're having coffee, they were meeting, they're asking questions, and it was just a warm, informal space to meet. And you go, well, okay, I'll see it when I believe it. But it's in that particular example, it was working. So maybe that bank has actually said, really understands their customers, and they've gone, that's what the customers that frequent this location are really interested in. Multipurpose, so again, just using, if you've got a branch, if you've got a lease, making the most of that, sharing some of that space out, inviting people in to do meetups and whatnot, and creating, again, an environment, a brand, and an experience. Co-working. Some banks are actually getting into the full co-working space, obviously in alliance or with partnership, but that's being trialled as well. So a warm and inviting environment. That doesn't look like a normal bank branch to me, but that's, you could say, experimental. But it's also an opportunity. People are using it. It's an opportunity to spend more time with your customers and learn about what's interested. Stop, have an experience with your customers. Some places are taking it to extreme in terms of financial education and whatnot, but okay, I can see what they're trying to do there. Virgin Money's doing, wow, I can't explain this one. They've got a bowling alley downstairs, and it's a destination, and they're trying different things, so that's happening. Dogs, you know, we're time poor these days, we want to walk the dog, you know, why can't we do the banking at the same time? So how are we responding to the changing needs? It's a very simple case, but how is our branch formats responding to those changing needs? More than a bank. I mean, in this case, you can laugh at it, but maybe what the branch managers found out that they do have a large amount of people that are interested in this kind of thing. And instead of visiting the branch once every month, now people are visiting once every week, and you start to build a relationship with that the branch manager or whoever's operating that. So that's another example there. Self-service. I mean, this is what we're seeing in terms of increasing foot traffic. I went to Chatswood yesterday, and CBA has one of these. It's Amazon Prime Locker. Again, in this case, it's integrating retail into the banking environment, and it's just increasing foot traffic, increasing the brand and whatnot. A book ahead, quite simple to do, but are your customers interested in it? Maybe if they are, you could schedule a hyper-personalized meeting in the same way that you do in your corporate world. So when you turn up to a meeting, you expect someone's got an agenda, you expect that someone's done preparation and that they're prepared to, kind of add value, rather than just, a very transactional relationship. So how can we change the nature of how we do that? Last example, innovate together. So in the examples where we want to kind of shift away from cash and cash services and shift towards advisory, sales and services, maybe we could look at things like what they're doing in the UK with a business banking hub and create a shared service for those more transactional, mundane needs, which are a vital part of banking and a need that we have today. I know that Australia Post does a level of that for the majors. What are we doing in regional areas as an example? Maybe even the bank branch needs to kind of separate. So all of the transactional and the cash stuff needs to kind of, there's a space for that, but there's also another physical space for the sales, advisory and service function. So what's holding us back? You go to that multi-million-dollar example with Halifax and whatnot, and you come up to the counter and there's this big, fat, dirty teller system right in front of you, and they're going to pop out, and then they try to spell your name, and you have to kind of turn the screen around, and you can't create beautiful experiences when you've got those impediments. So maybe that's the case, right? And I got an example of that, but this other bank, they tried to do the Apple Store. Studio B in the UK, they tried to kind of glass windows and make it all cool and funky, but what they did is they took the teller system and they just inserted it into a table. So it's still got the mouse, still got the keyboard, and so what you find is, the teller's going like this, and it's clunky, right? So, and then you open up a new branch or a new flagship store, and you put all these tablets and things out, and it's a digital zone. How many people actually use that area? And people have already got their mobile phones and whatnot. So, if we're going to spend money on technology, and if we're going to, it needs to be integrated into the experience. And in this case here, maybe they've gone too far. That's a fully unmanned branch. In China. So digital interactions, we're doing a lot more, as I said, NCR sits between physical and digital, we're doing a lot more of this kind of stuff where the teller is joint at the hip with the customer. And they are working together off a shared screen, it might be an iPad. There's a lot of, that enables the teller to actually be mobile and move around the branch. So the teller might be the concierge, and you come in and you can move straight to a teller-based conversation without having to go stand behind swap screens or go behind another big physical monitor and whatnot. The tablets are really good. We're still seeing, a lot of experimentation with those big TVs and whatnot. But anything where you can kind of get closer in terms of a hip-to-hip conversation and work together to solve problems, I think will help in that environment where we have more choice and we need more advisory and consultancy from our bank managers. Maximize it. So one of the key things that we spend a lot of time on is maximizing self-service. So obviously we have a number of these self-service devices which can do the majority of the transactions that we have the simple transactions that we have at the teller today. So it's about migrating a number of those transactions from the teller into these self-service devices so that we can free up the tellers for those sales service relationship conversations. In some cases, we're seeing completely cashless branches in the sense that the ATM does all of it's a TCR, all of the cash goes through the ATM, the tellers don't touch it. So if someone comes to the teller and wants to do something with cash, the teller will come around and help someone with a self-service device, right? But what we're actually seeing there is that there's also the rise of these, at least in other markets, there's this rise of coin style where people. The banks are saying, well, we don't actually want to be in the business of cash in terms of changing money out and whatnot. You can go to a self-service machine for that kind of thing. We don't have that here. I think CBA has some of those machines. But transaction migration is a big challenge, is a big thing that we are focused on. How do we not just get the technology done, but also get people's behavior changing? So we prioritize, we look at all the different pain points, and that's a large focus, which will set branches up to have more of that, the sales and service conversations. So choreography is one of the biggest things in these physical formats, particularly when you've got a large format. You can often find dead space, you can often find it hard to navigate. If you don't have a concierge there, it's not clear where you go, how you interact, etc., etc. So talk a bit about choreography. If you take this is just some example branch formats, right? Now what happens if you want to try something new? What happens if you're a branch manager and you're understanding how it's all flowing? Today, there's not much flexibility or autonomy in our branch staff to be able to tweak things and actually improve the customer experience. So we're helping one of our customers, and he went away and he came back the next day with a screwdriver and overalls, and he said, "Oh well, we're just going to implement what you said yesterday. I was going to change this table," and he wasn't allowed to do it, right? I mean, it's so sometimes we're a bit too restrictive. So in this environment, we've got this great physical space. Not only how are we adapting it? It's not a static thing. Let's see these as opportunities to connect with people, and in order to do so, that will need to change as we understand more about the changing needs of our customers. And so the final slide here is actually looking at every step in detail of that customer journey as they come in, and looking at the areas of compromise and pain point, and go, well, if you map out, the majority of journeys today, are they choreographed? And how much anxiety is in there? How much frustration is in there? And we heard an example today of simply charging someone for a transaction. I mean, that's a red score on the journey, right? It's not something that we want. That's going to deliver a great experience. So the more detailed and the more nuanced you can get, I think you can start to tweak things. It might be the sound in the branch. It might be too loud to actually have a decent conversation. There might not be the right enough signage. One of the key things we see is the concierge. It can be a really good thing, or it can be a really bad thing. If someone's there and they're very personable, great, it works really well. But if you walk in and there is no concierge and it says we're here to help and no one's standing there because they're on their lunch break, that's a bit of a negative. We often see a lot of people actually hiding out in the back office as well. And so, it can often appear that there's only one person in the branch, and it's a very lonely kind of space. So how are we looking at how people, process, technology, format, how are we looking at the whole choreography in order to optimize the experience? And I think that we can do a lot with what we have today without doing anything too drastic. I think there's some repurposing, there's some tweaking of our current formats and experience to create, to make physical spaces more meaningful. I've tried very hard here today to boost the profile of the physical space and build a case to say that the importance of the physical branch will increase, but it won't increase and it won't be valuable if we don't look at the format and the function. And we have to do things differently. It's back to that whole example with closing branches. If we don't do anything, at some point, the argument will come, there's not enough foot traffic and it costs too much. Let's evolve our branches. Let's have a look at these areas. I'd love to chat more, and it's time for drinks. So thank you for your time.